everyone. Let me see if I can position myself so that you all see me. It's a pleasure to be here. We're going to get started right away because there's lots of material that I'd like to cover tonight. And just some housekeeping to start with. I have got a disclaimer. So I'm wearing a yellow t-shirt. I was hoping that the neon t-shirt would distract you from any wrinkles, any bags under the eyes, or anything of that sort. The other disclaimer is I am a therapeutic riding instructor. I teach riding to children and adults with special needs. I am not a therapist. I am not a mental health practitioner. So everything that I would like us to learn today, or that we would like to talk about today, is going to be from the eyes of a therapeutic riding instructor. So I'm sure that in this group tonight there are occupational therapists or physical therapists or educators, and we welcome your questions because it's always interesting to hear from those professionals that are also in our industry. Then any other disclaimer, I'm going to try and follow your, whatever you write at the bottom, your little text, as well as I can, but this is the first time I do this, and I'm a better rider and better in the barn than I am in front of a computer. Okay, so let's get going. The first slide I'm just going to read. Maybe some of you have already done so. It'll be faster that way. So sensory trails offer educational, social, creative, and movement opportunities for individuals with special needs. Creating a sensory trail for our participants will add another educational tool that will help our instructors, therapists, and educators implement teaching strategies to assist our students in achieving their individual education therapy goals. This is not your IEPs, but definitely we try to match those as well. Educating our instructors, therapists, and teachers on how to implement these novel teaching strategies is key. So let's get going. I understand that I need to wait a little till you get the next slide. By now you should have gotten it, so if you haven't, then I'll just be slower in the future. But what we'll learn tonight, I want you to think about a sensory trail as a puzzle, and we've got a few pieces of the puzzle that we're going to put together as we go, and these will support your participants' sensory integration goals. So that's what really drives us to build a sensory trail for our centers. So the pieces of the puzzle are sensory input. What is this? What is perception? The 5 senses, 2 question marks there. The other 2 we will discuss. There are more than 5 senses. What is sensory integration? And of course dysfunction, so DSI. And then what is a traditional integration therapy? And then our sensory trails, which are non-traditional. Okay, ready? Let's put this puzzle together. So sensory input. So understanding all the aspects of the visual, tactile, auditory, olfactory, and vestibular sensory input will help you work to meet specific and broad spectrum goals for each of your riders. Are we missing a couple of senses here? Who would like to jump in? What are we missing? There's 2 that we're missing. If you guys write quickly, I can wait. Otherwise, never mind. I'll jump on to the next slide. Sarah, proprioception. Way to go. And vestibular. Okay, you guys are awesome. This is great. All right. So we are missing proprioception and we are missing the vestibular. But actually, if you read down visual, tactile, auditory, olfactory, and vestibular, vestibular was there. So Naomi, read, or I don't know if you can see the slides, but we are missing one. What is it? But I love that you guys mentioned those two, because those are really important for what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'll count to 3. Aha, taste. All right, Loretta, you win $1 million. Taste. And I just want to say very quickly, we're not going to talk about taste today. Normally, we have lots of our clients have difficulties with some foods, and so, you know, we don't really bring foods into our sensory trails, okay? All right, so moving on then. Perception. This is a concept that we need to keep in our minds when we are thinking of sensory trails and sensory input and dysfunction. Perception is the organization, identification, and interpretation of sensory information in order to represent and understand the environment. So we read the environment, we read what is happening around us through perception. And we also read what happens within us. We perceive differently, all of us. We're all individuals. Okay, so the 5 senses, and I don't know if you can read that, but of course we've got the visual, the olfactory, the auditive, the taste, and the tactile, and those are the typical 5 that we learn. And we all know now that we're missing those 2 important ones that you guys mentioned earlier, which are vestibular and proprioception. So, okay, so here we go. So why do we need to know about the vestibular? We know in our industry that the movement of the horse gives us this huge input, and that is the same 3 dimensions that the horse, that we have when we walk, the horse has in his hind legs, and so the horse alone challenges the vestibular sense, postural equilibrium, and balance. So when we walk our riders on their horses through a sensory trail, we challenge them even further. And just remember this, because once we get to the photos of the actual sensory trail, then we will discuss this further. All right, so last one, what about proprioception? And yes, this is the kinesthetic sense, and what it does, it provides the brain with information where are our body parts. So the neurologists do a simple test, and they ask you with your eyes closed, so I couldn't find a photo of anyone touching his nose with their eyes closed, but everybody do that quickly. If you close your eyes, can you touch your nose? Well, there's lots of people who cannot. And when someone has difficulty with proprioception, that sense and touch are related, and therefore those people with proprioception deficits have deficits in their perception and action. And action brings me to talk about functionality. And we all know that word in our therapeutic riding centers when we work with children and adults. We know that we have to look very closely at how functional they are to be able to perform the skills that we ask them to perform. So now we go to sensory integration, and of course that is the process that organizes all those pieces of the puzzle in your body and in the environment. So we bring it all together, and when we have sensory integration, then we normally, typically, can be pretty functional in our environment. So jumping ahead, now we all, I'm sure, unless you guys have any questions so far, are familiar with dysfunction and sensory integration. Many of our clients with autism, with attention deficits, born with cerebral palsy, many of the populations that we serve have some sort of a sensory dysfunction. So either it's, you know, tactile and they can't be touched, or they have difficulty wearing a helmet, or they can't stand, you know, the different smells in the barn, it could be, or visually they get easily distracted, but we'll go ahead and move on unless you have any questions. Now I want you to, I'm going to read this quickly. We have lots of time. We're doing good in time, but I want you to think, as I read, you probably won't be able to read this. It's in small font so that I could fit it all in. So, if you are in 3rd grade and waiting for the school bus, you're challenged by sensory experiences during everyday activities. While you're still reeling from the battle with your mom over brushing your teeth, that peppermint toothpaste tastes like fire in your mouth. The school bus pulls up. You run past the bus monitor's haze of perfume and sit at the back of the bus. In this heightened state, you become even more aware of your new school shirt with its stiff label and that awful feeling like a wire brush being poked into the back of your neck. The sensory experiences of the movement of the bus, the sound of your excited classmates laughing and yelling above the roar of the bus engine, all contribute to your increased agitation. By the time you arrive at school, you are wound up and ready to unravel. There is no time to wait for the bus monitor's direction. Getting off the bus quickly becomes a matter of survival, and you resort to pushing, shoving, and finally kicking your way out. Unfortunately, there is a price to pay for this seemingly outward aggression. You can expect another trip to the principal's office. And what about those social skills? So I found this, there's some credits along this presentation. I found this in a research study, and I thought this is great because a lot of us suffer from little things that affect us all, but when there's a child that does have a dysfunction, when all these things attack this child, it can be pretty overwhelming. And these children do come and ride at all of our therapy riding centers. So for us as instructors, to help them learn how to ride, it's important to see it from their point of view. All right, so the traditional sensory integrative therapy, it takes place one-on-one. Usually it's in a room with suspended equipment for varying movement and sensory experiences. The goal of this therapy is not to teach skills, but to follow the child's lead and artfully select and modify activities according to the child's responses. Now, this next paragraph, I'm going to read it. I want you to think about it and bring it with you to the next slides. The activities afford a variety of opportunities to experience tactile, vestibular, and proprioceptive input in a way that provides the just right challenge for the child to promote increasingly more complex adaptive responses to environmental challenges. The reason I want us to bring this forward is because we work with children and adults with varying degrees of sensory dysfunction. Some children only, or adults, some clients, let's say, only have tactile issues. Maybe it's just when it rains, they have difficulty riding outside, even if it's just a mist, few drops. Other individuals have visual and tactile, or just auditive, or they don't know where their body parts are in space, and they have a lot of trouble during mounting or during dismounting or holding their reins. And then of course the vestibular, we want to teach someone to go around the world, or as in interactive vaulting we call the mill, and these individuals become very anxious, and again, it's because they have difficulty with their vestibular sense. There's a dysfunction there. So as instructors, it's really important for us to be able to observe our students first on the ground before you put a kid on a horse, when you're doing your first evaluation, to accept this individual to your center. Observe the child walking and standing and sitting, and ask him or her to do, easy movements with their arms and their legs, and observe how they move and how they respond to what you're asking them to perform. This will give you a real good idea, not only on if they have difficulty with vestibular or proprioceptive or their kinesthetic sense, but it will also give you a good idea of what their postural alignment or what their posture is going to be like once they're on the horse. And it'll give you some insight onto what types of challenges this individual is going to have during their riding experiences. So let's move on now. If anybody has any questions to this point, I'll be happy to take them. And remember, I can't hear you guys, so unless you write them down, and I will go forward to the next slide, because I know it takes a little bit to show on your computers. Okay, so no questions. You guys are all comfortable with all this information. That's great. Okay, so what is a sensory trail? And now I want you to close your eyes and picture yourselves riding through a winding up and downhill terrain under a canopy of trees, feeling the gentle breeze on your face, listening to the birds sing, smelling the scent of nature, and encountering a series of props created with educational and therapeutic goals in mind. My first experience with a sensory trail was in Scotland many, many years ago, and it was a botanical garden in Edinburgh, and it was created for typical individuals that were visiting the gardens and would wind up going through an area where not only were there beautiful gardens, trees, and flowers, but also pieces of art, sculptures, and so the visual input was amazing. The tactile input, because these sculptures, we were allowed to touch them. Then, of course, the olfactory with the flowers and just the scents in the garden. And that was my first experience with the sensory trail, and I just absolutely loved it. And if any of you have ever been in Miami, Florida, there is a sensory trail down there. It's called the Fairchild Gardens, and it is a huge botanical garden, and the art pieces there are absolutely stunning. So what we're trying to do is to bring the sensory trail to our center to provide our riders with enhanced experiences. And let me go back a couple of slides when I asked you to think about the traditional therapies. And remember that when we go into one of our sensory trails, depending on each one of your riders and what their goals are, they may be able to just work with one of the props during a trail ride, or maybe they can visit 10 props in one trail ride. So it's really important that having, a sensory trail with many different props that offer opportunities to challenge every one of those senses that we've talked about. Instructors, it's a good idea to think a little bit less sometimes is more, and to allow the individuals as they go through the sensory trail to really interact with one prop slowly at a time and give them a chance to study it, to touch, to listen, to really take in what they're observing. Okay, so let's go for a ride. We're on our way into a sensory trail, and this one specifically is in Florida. This is the last sensory trail that I put together for a center down here, and we're going to, I want you to imagine, if some of you probably have been down in Florida, the forests here are very lush. There's palm trees and pine trees, and we have all kinds of birds, plenty of those, and of course alligators. You got to be careful with those, but there's rabbits and all kinds of critters living in the forests, and usually you may have a glimpse of them, but when the horses are coming in, they kind of scuttle off. All right, so this is what we call the big house's shapes, and the rider will need to walk towards this tree and ask his or her horse to halt. And as you see, the door is open. There is a latch, so the individual will have to use their vestibular, their proprioceptive or kinesthetic sense, and open that door. And inside, you've got the shapes, and at the back, those shapes are also colored in. Now, to me, the interesting part of this house, of course, the colors that'll give you the visual, but the shape of the house, and that's something that the kids find fascinating when you start talking about it. So tell me about your house, and do these walls look like the walls at your house, and can they see that the one house, the one side to the right in the blue is round, and the chimney, the way it's coming out, and the windows, how they've been drawn. So there's a lot of input here that you can work with. And of course, the child can put his hand in and retrieve an object, and then you can talk about the color and the shape and how does that object feel. So there we're talking again about the tactile, and there's plenty of educational opportunities here when you're talking about colors and numbers. How many little shapes do we have inside the house, and can you count how many windows, etc. This is also a birdhouse, as you probably can see on the door. There's an opening there, and so we can talk about where do the birds live, etc. So moving on, this one is again going to challenge the vestibular and kinesthetic, because each one of those little windows is a different type of latch. If you can see close to my finger, to the left, there's the typical lunchbox latch, and then to the right, there's the one with the chain, and so each one is different. And at the bottom, the little gate where the dog is, that one has a latch, and then you've got the rabbit and the cat and the flowers, and those also have latches. When you open these, you're going to find different visuals of what lives in a barn, or who lives in a barn. And again, I'd forgotten the one on the tree, where you open that one and you'll probably find a squirrel or someone who lives in a tree. So the kids really, or the adults, need to stretch and figure out how to open these, and that's what's most important, because now we're working on fine motor skills and perception. We talked about that one, and it's very important. How do they perceive these doors, and are they able to open them? And will they have difficulty opening different ones? So even though we're not we're not occupational therapists, we're riding instructors. This is something that, or a prop that occupational therapists really love. So, did you make these, or were they purchased? Stacy is asking from Clayton, North Carolina. We actually make them. We have a group of people that we work together, and we create sensory trails for centers. So what we do is we meet up with the instructors and your program managers at the center, and take a look at your sensory trail, and then what are your needs? What population are you serving? It's very important when you're creating a sensory trail to think about what will serve your participants best to help them with their sensory integration goals. So this, for example, is a great one for children who are in a hypnotherapy class and are working with an occupational therapist or a speech therapist. But they're also, the Red Barn is great for your instructors that are working with children with autism, with children with Down syndrome, with learning disabilities. So this one will serve many populations. Now, adults with MS, for example, probably, we'll do it once and have fun, and the drawings inside are beautiful. There's cows, and there's sheep, and there's goats, and there's horses. Of course, there's horses. So it's your typical farmhouse. Okay, we're going to move on now, and Twinkle Twinkle. So this is one of my favorite ones, actually, because I'm not just moving. I'm sitting on a Pilates ball. I'm hyperactive, you may have noticed, so I need to move. So this is, it's a musical instrument made of tubes, and then there's a Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Now, you've got the stars around it, so this one has a lot of input. The individual, again, walks towards the prop or the station, and has to halt his or her horse and stretch. My hand is showing you two small little red batons. So these batons are like a conductor's baton, and basically they will make music by striking those metal tubes. And so, as an instructor, I love to sing the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and have them sing along. You can also, as you're doing that, point with your finger to each word and help your riders with their expressive language. A lot of our riders with many different diagnoses may have difficulty with their expressive language, but a lot of them have very good receptive language. So they understand what we're singing, they understand what we are reading to them, and they just have difficulty singing it back. If they have apraxia, for example, that's a diagnosis that probably many of you have come across in your centers, and that is the difficulty of forming words, even though you do have the receptive language and you do understand those words in your brain. So this is a favorite. I work with, at this trail, I worked with a child about 6 years old with autism, and he was not interested at all in making music or in the poem or in the song. He halted his horse beside the station and immediately took one of the tubes and looked into it, and he wanted to see if he could look through it. And we must have spent probably 5 long minutes just looking through the different tubes. And this kid was fascinated by what he could see through the tube. So again, the participants, your clients, sometimes will surprise you when you have designed and created a sensory trail for to meet different sensory integration goals, and they come up with stuff that you didn't even think about. So that's also pretty cool when you're working on a sensory trail with your riders. Okay, so we'll move on. And then again, this one is a poem, The 5 Green Speckled Frogs, and so you've got counting opportunities. You can also compare, and that's, you know, mathematical concepts. Is one bigger than the other? Is one fatter? How many eyes do they have? How many toes, etc., etc. And once more, you have the opportunity of reading a poem. And there is research done that tells us that when you're reading to small children, if you can find books that have, you know, great stories, but have little rhymes inside, like Dr. Seuss, for example. Kids love to listen to the story and wait impatiently for the moment where the rhyme in the story appears. So children seem to be able to learn those rhymes because it's musical, and we all know that music is a form of communication, and so they love to, you know, rhyme along, and that's a way to get these kids to encourage them to continue reading and continue working on their expressive language skills. Then in the middle, between the frogs on the left side and on the right side, I'm not sure if you can see clearly, there's a series of chains, and there's 2 different colors, and of course the kids can stop, and they've got to stretch, and they can move the chains, and this gives them the tactile input. It also, of course, gives them the visual. They're working again on their vestibular and kinesthetic, and you always use your writing skills to halt and to walk on once you're done with that specific station. All right, any questions so far? We're half an hour into it. We still have another half hour, so we've got plenty of time. All right, this one is, I keep saying this is one of my favorites, right? They're all my favorites. But this one's pretty cool, and basically, these are movable. They, on the one side, there's 3 sides to them, to the little, they're not pyramids, what are they? Who knows what they are? How are the tubes attached at the top? Oh, okay. So Lynn just asked, I guess from the previous slide, how are the tubes attached to the top? So what we did, we did it with the chains, and we did it with the musical instrument as well. With the chains, you just put little hooks up, and with the tubes, you can open a small hole, and then you can put a chain through to attach those tubes up to your 4x4 at the top. So that's how that's done. Thanks, Lynn, for that question. That's a good question. And, you know, if you guys have any questions on how we make them, please just jump in. We love to share, and we just hope that every center in North America is going to have a sensory trail of one type or another, because they are amazing educational tools for our population. Okay, so this one, the memory game, the reason I think it's really educational and has lots of opportunities to challenge the kinesthetic and the proprioceptive and your visuals and your memory, and because the 16 pieces each has 3 sides to it. So there's numbers from number 1 to 16. There's also colors, And then there's also, in this case, we did little jungle animals, or wild animals. So there's zebra and there's a monkey, but with those there's two of each. So there's two yellows, two greens, two monkeys, two zebras, the only one that there's not two of are the numbers. And with this one you can create all kinds of patterns. There's 4 columns and 4 rows. So you can teach that concept. What is a row? What is a column? You can also have them count how many rows and columns, and then you can create patterns. So the first row up at the top, we're going to do all animals, and the second one we're going to do numbers, and the third one we're going to do colors, and then the fourth one you can just have them strike with their hand, with their fingers as they stretch, to just move them all and see how they land. There are so many games we can play with this this prop. So this is just another example of an educational tool in a sensory trail. Okay, the gecko convention. We have lots of geckos down here, and lizards, big ones and little ones. So this is always a fun one, and the use of your trees in your sensory trail. Usually, I've been to sensory trails across North America. In Colorado, Hearts and Horses has one in Loveland that is just awesome. I visited there. Naomi, who is here with us tonight, actually was there as well at the same time, and we walked their sensory trail. And of course, Loveland, Colorado is dry land. It's a desert, really, and so they've got the red clay, and they don't have a lot of trees. They have very little rainfall, so they have created a fantastic sensory trail with all kinds of props. It's open. There's no trees, or very few of them, but you've got those huge mountains as a backdrop, and they've got very hilly terrain, so that always is great to challenge the vestibular when these riders are going up and down those hills and coming across those props. So that's a really cool one. And for those of you who are, because I was trying to check out where you guys are all from, and there's some of you in New Jersey and Maine and Massachusetts, and so the Northeast, you have those beautiful forests with the big trees and very lush as well, and you have the 4 seasons. So, visiting the sensory trail during the 4 seasons, depending, of course, on how harsh your winter is always a fascinating experience, and a comparative educational tool. What happens with the geckos? If you have geckos, well, they're all frozen in the winter. Anyway, so we'll move on. One of the things I don't want to forget to also mention is that maintenance is key. You invest time and resources in creating a sensory trail, and then you really want to maintain it. There will be props that will have to come in probably during the winters, for those of you who have very cold, harsh winters, but for us here in Florida, it's during the hurricane season. So, for example, these geckos all come in, and therefore, how you put them up is also important if you've got to bring them down in a hurry. All right, so moving on, unless you guys have any questions. The maze. Now, this is a very cool one. I've got my hand on a handle, and right across from my hand to the right there's another handle. So there's 2 handles, and there's a small little red ball that's going to be moving around. You can actually move this maze with a circular motion to the right or to the left, and your participants are going to try to take that little red ball through the maze. And so some of your participants who are sensory seekers will probably want to stop here and just swirl this around and again and again and again. And you know, everyone has their own theories, but again, I think less is more. When I bring an individual that will focus on only one prop and just become fascinated by it and not want to move on to anything else, I will allow that. And what I will do then on my next trip to the sensory trail is I will bring the prop down and put it away for that next session. And so we'll look for it if the child remembers and asks. Otherwise we may not mention it, but and oh my goodness, well, what could have happened to the maze? And we can talk about the animals that live in the woods, and maybe one of the animals was playing with it and didn't put it back, and what a problem that is. So again, that is an educational opportunity for teaching children to be tidy and put their stuff away. But then I will take them on to something else that will help them become fascinated with and learn from, and maybe the third time, the next time I bring them in, I can bring the maze back. So you know, when you have a sensory trail with this kind of sensory input, you really don't want to bring your participants through absolutely every one of the props every time, unless they can deal with it. And you know, you will have lots of participants that don't have any type of sensory integration dysfunction and are coming to the sensory trail to learn, you know, to challenge their vestibular or their kinesthetic, or just to be able to work on their expressive language. There's a prop that comes to my mind that I don't have in a photo here, because there's many more, but we can't show them all. And it's a blackbird. And so you bring a backpack and you bring your chalk with you, and if you have maybe 3 or 4 riders, one of them walks by and writes something and leaves a message for the rider behind. And so that will also be a great opportunity for social skills, and it will of course be an opportunity for them to be able to write, to practice on their fine motor skills, and you can tailor what they're doing, what they're writing, to their functionality, to their ability. So we talked about function. Some kids don't know how to write words, but they can write their name, or they can write letters. So that's also perfectly fun, to write letters and leave them there for the next writer to try to identify what they have written. Okay, so no questions, so I'm going to move on. Okay, so now it's time to tell a story. This is a great, the clock, because this one has been designed with children with autism in mind. And children with autism can be very concrete. And there's a time to get up, and then we have to brush our teeth, and then we get dressed, and then we sit down and have breakfast. And we have, at many of our centers, we have those little storybooks that we carry with us that show a child arriving at the barn, and then patting the horse, and then tacking up, or helping tack up, or leading the horse, and then mounting, and then on and on. And this helps these individuals be able to plan in their head what it is they're going to do, and also helps them to deal with the challenges that they face. For example, if they have difficulties with the mounting, but we go through the little storybook. So this one is a little bit that concept, and of course you can teach the time, and you can always come back and say, you know, how much time do we have left on the trail, and by the way, time is also a sense. You can look it up. Okay, the sense of time. Janet from Oakland is asking, is there a ball that rolls through the maze? If so, how does it stay in the maze, being that it is vertical? Good question. Yes, there is a ball. It's a small little red ball in this case. And of course, we can make them with different sizes and colors, and we can put more than one. And the prop has a plastic, hard plastic covering that does not allow any water in or the ball to fall out. And I'm in this group of people that create the sensory trails. I'm one of the ones that comes up with the ideas, but believe me, I'm not the carpenter. I love to paint, so some of the artistic parts you'll see I can do, but my husband is an engineer, and my son Carlos is an industrial designer, and so they're the ones that know how to build these and how to make sure that, you know, they withstand the rain and the wind and the UV rays as well. So good question. Okay, so unless there's any questions for the clock, I am going to actually tell you guys a story. Josh is 17 years old. This is a true story. He was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3 and had never said a word. I had been working with Josh at a therapeutic riding center, and of course his name is not Josh, and this is not the little boy in the picture. But Josh had been riding with me one-on-one for about 2 years, which means 30 sessions per year. That's 60 riding lessons. And he was nonverbal. So, you know, he would come to the barn and he was happy to pat his horse and help get him ready, and he was happy to lead the horse out, and he had no problem walking up the steps. So although he had or has low muscle tone, he had pretty good kinesthetic and vestibular, and he seemed to enjoy the input coming at him from the world, but did not have the skills to share what that meant for him with expressive language. He was a lot of fun to work with, and we had the riding arena, and that's where we rode most of the time, and there was a trail through the forest, but it was not a sensory trail. And then we decided we were going to put a sensory trail in the center, and we worked on it, and we created this awesome sensory trail. And the first time I went into the sensory trail with Josh, as we were walking towards it, I explained to him that today was a very special day because we were going to go through the woods that he knew so well, but we were going to encounter a few things that he had never seen in those woods before, and that we were going to talk about them. And so I don't know why, but I said, it's such a beautiful day today, and the sun is out, and before we get under the canopy of the trees, it's going to be HOT. And I did this because I think I was teaching another group of riders prior. We were working on spelling, and so I was still kind of in the mood. And Josh, he blurted it out. He said, HOT, hot. The handler, he had no sidewalkers, but the handler and I froze. And so I acted as if nothing had happened, and we just kept walking, and I said, yes, it's really hot. But now when we get under the trees, it's going to be COOL. And he said, cool. COOL, cool. And then I knew that we were onto something amazing. And so as we approached the sensory trail, I said, Josh, I want you, when we get to the new part of the trail, I want you to look for something yellow. We had built a yellow house, and it was kind of at the beginning of the trail. And before we arrived at the yellow house, there was some frogs, and he just said, frog, green, frog. And then it went yellow, yellow house, and it was butterflies, 2 butterflies. And he just started blurting it all out. It was amazing. And I guess this was probably the experience that that told me that we needed to build sensory trails everywhere and use them, and it was such an experience. So we arrived at the barn after we had gone through the sensory trail, and he just wanted to go through it again and again and again and say all the words, and they were coming out, and he couldn't believe it, I guess, because he had never heard his own voice. And when we got to the barn and dismounted and he patted his horse, he looked at me, made eye contact, and said, see you Wednesday, next Wednesday, and left. And I'm telling you this story now, guys, and all my hairs are standing. It was amazing. So from that day on, I am converted to sensory trails, and I just want to spread the word. I know many of you have sensory trails, and I'm just hoping that tonight maybe I have inspired you a little to use them more for your participants. And certainly we are, again, writing instructors. We teach writing skills, but we all know as writers how important it is to have good balance, to have good postural alignment, to be able to use our fine motor skills with the reins, and our gross motor skills with our seat and our legs, and riding is an opportunity for social exchange. So with lots of our participants that have a handler and 2 sidewalkers and an instructor, there you have a small community, and kids can talk about things, they can choose what they like, they can express themselves, and through drawing or through writing on the blackboard, or there's many opportunities. Okay, so Carlos Plaza, of course, he's in. This is my son, and he screams, wow. And Jenny, that is incredible. Thank you. I agree with you guys. It is incredible. So we've got a few minutes left for questions. I want to thank you. Please do visit my website. It's AlisonPlaza.com. We have a question here from Stacy. Do the clients get off and on the horses, and if so, are there mounting blocks at each station? Not at each station, because, well, you can, of course. There's no end to creativity. But I'll tell you what I've done, that if Gisela was here, she would probably laugh, and I'm going to say I don't know how Path would think when I share this with you, but what I've done is I have put sturdy barrels at some of the props, and they've got, this has only, I guess you can only do it with your smaller children. So what you do is you walk with your horse and you halt beside the barrel, and the barrel is right beside the prop. And the child dismounts to the barrel, and this is an awesome, very cool experience. And of course, you're not going to do this with children who, you know, you have to choose your population, let's put it that way. So they dismount to the barrel, they play with the prop, they explain it to the horse, which is standing right there with his face in the prop. And so instead of having the horse and his face in front, they're parallel to the horse's face, and now they can talk to the horse about what they're doing. So that's something that I've done. And then from the barrel, they just hop back on. And for your children with autism, for your little ones that are 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, they love this. I mean, they love jumping off the horse onto a barrel, jumping off the barrel, and then why not go for a run and come back and then get back on. So basically, when we are teaching our our participants, our clients to ride, we want them to be able to mount and dismount. And, you know, with the little kids, you can just throw them on that horse. You don't even have to, depends how strong you are or not, and how tall your horse is, of course. But there's many opportunities for mounting and dismounting. Okay, so let me see what, can I go back, because now you've started asking many questions. Okay, so let's see. Where are we? And now I have to look, okay. Wow. You guys. You all started asking questions. Okay. Somebody, can you type the website? Okay, that's been answered. It will be uploaded, so that's answered. Copies of the slides, no problem. Do the clients get off? And, oh, okay, so that was Stacy's question. That's where I started talking like a crazy woman. Sorry about that. So can you type, okay, you'll get an email, Alison Plaza, about how much time do you spend on the shows for each lesson? Well, if it's a one-on-one, we do a half hour. If it's a group lesson for kids, we do an hour. If I have a lesson right after and I have to hurry back, then it's got to be the hour. But if I'm having a breakthrough with someone and I don't have a lesson right away, then I'll stay as long as I need to. So then there's a thank you, Len, for coming. There's another thank you, and then there's really great ideas with sound. Oh yes, there's a lot that you can do with sound. I'm a proponent of musical instruments, and because again, music is a form of communication. So for a lot of your populations that are non-verbal, they can communicate with music. If they can learn how to play an instrument, it is a gift. And so, you know, you can have all kinds of instruments hanging from trees and on your sensory trails. Then what else? What other question do you have here? I believe it's most beneficial. Okay. Part of the experience is the ride out to the sensory trail. You can spend whatever time you want. That is correct. That was Kathleen. And then Naomi says, I use my sensory trail as a treat after some good arena work. There you go. Lots of thank yous. All right. Well, we've got a couple minutes. So if you have any other questions, I'll be happy. Otherwise, I'll wait for our organizer, Jenny, to let us know when we need to stop broadcasting. You guys are all very welcome. If you have any further questions, just write to me. This is what I do. I'm an independent a consultant and clinician, so I travel the U.S. and other countries sharing knowledge. I am at the time in my life where my children are grown up and I can travel. My husband is amazing, and so he actually is happy pushing me out the door sometimes, and so, you know, I have been very lucky to be at the right place at the right time during my equestrian career, and now is the time to share the knowledge. So please call me with any questions, anything that I can help you with. I will be absolutely delighted. Okay, so Peter says, great ideas. I'm going to get busy building some of them ASAP. Please have you found the fountain of youth down there. Do I look younger, Peter? Thank you. I love you. You're a liar. Okay, and then Naomi says, have you had any issues with safety, especially with hanging objects? Never have I had a problem. You know, the kids wear helmets. You've got volunteers for your children who need a little bit more assistance, and if you have a runaway student, well, you may not want to dismount that kid because he'll run into the woods and then good luck. but we've never really. And I've played in many sensory trails because I have traveled and worked in Colorado, in Connecticut, New York, here in Florida, and I've never had an incident report whilst I was in the sensory trail. However, I have had many kids falling off, especially when they're learning how to canter when they're in the arena. And that was the last question. And are we all done, guys? We have 1 minute left. I'm happy to stay on, but we can say goodnight. So it's been a pleasure again, and thank you for your great questions, and thank you for joining us. And I hope to meet you at some point in the future. Take care. Bye-bye.